Hey team, what's up? I just wanted to throw together a quick video about how to take better photos in the field. I know the social people like me, Taylor, and Dan, we're getting on you guys a lot about, hey, please take some photos, get us some more photos, we need content for social media. And then you guys are sitting there like, well, I really want to give you something, but I don't know what you guys want, right? And so the question is always there. And I figured it was finally time to do something. I know Taylor is also going to be giving something in a document format, so stay tuned for that. But basically today I'm just going to go over 3 basic concepts that I think can help you improve your photography in the field. So let's jump right into it. The first is going to be lighting. Lighting is what I think is probably the most important aspect. If you ignore the other 2, that's fine. As long as you get good lighting on your subject, I think everything else follows after that. So the general rule of thumb is that your subject, the person or the thing that you're trying to focus on, is the brightest part of the photo. If it's not, your eye generally will travel to the brightest part, and that's not what we want, right? So subject, brightest part of the photo. Number 2, avoid direct or overhead lighting. It tends to cause really deep shadows under the eyes, unseemly shadows under the chin, giving the appearance of extra weight. So you want to avoid those lighting conditions. And some suggestions to get better lighting in general on your subjects are follows. Use a window. If you're next to a window or near a window in a building and it's moderately sunny outside and the sun isn't shining straight through, it will generally provide a really soft light. So even now you can see I have a window to my left and a little bit behind me, which is why it's kind of strange, but it's not causing really heavy shadows, and it's just giving me a nice wash of light. So use a window if you have one. Number 2, shoot in the shade. If your subject is in the shade and the background isn't super bright, you got to watch out for that. That will generally provide a decent lighting. It won't be super dynamic. It's going to be pretty flat, but you will be able to focus on your subject a little bit better than if you were in direct overhead light outside of the shade. What's another thing you can do? You can shoot during golden hour, or magic hour as it is called. Golden hour is the hour after sunrise and the hour before sunset, and the sun sits on the horizon pretty low, providing a nice orange cast to everything. It's not very high, so you're not going to get those shadows under the eyes, and you generally get pretty decent pictures no matter where you are. In places like Guatemala, where it's pretty mountainous, or if you're in the cities, you have to be aware that buildings and volcanoes, mountains, that kind of stuff, they're going to cast shadows. And so the golden hour may not be as effective, given the fact that as soon as you're in the shadow, it's going to get pretty dark. So just be aware that will affect your timing if you're trying to plan something with an impresario or a place that you want to shoot. And then finally, this is just a little tip. If you're in the city and it's during the day, it's pretty bright, place your subject somewhere across from a bright object. And typically that's just going to be the side of a building. And what that does is it acts as a reflector for the sun to fill in the deeper shadows on your subject, and it creates a pretty pleasing effect. The second point we're going to focus on is composition, and really for us there's just one basic rule, which is center your subject. And by centering your subject, you're placing all of the emphasis on that part of the photo. And so there's really nothing more that needs to be said other than watch your backgrounds. If it's very cluttered or it's super vibrant and bright and your subject isn't, what's going to happen is your eye is going to be traveling to all those other elements in the photo, and you don't want that to happen. So if you notice that your background is super messy, like it's in the market stalls of Guatemala, or you're in some part of the city that's very busy in the background, try moving your subject against a wall, which will produce a more even background and place more emphasis on your subject. And for more info about composing an image in general, you can just Google rule of thirds or composing photography, and you'll get just an endless wealth of knowledge about where to place your subject in the frame if you're interested about that kind of stuff. Finally, color. Color is pretty simple. I'm not going to tell you all about color theory. There's a ton of information out there on it. But just be aware that color acts very similar to light in that the more vibrant or saturated something is, your eye is going to tend to look at that thing first. So if you have a subject in a very bright dress, Guatemala, that's going to happen all the time. The more traditional stuff anyways. Your eye is probably going to travel to that first, especially if you've centered the subject and they're the brightest. It all works together to really emphasize what's important in the image and where your eye should be traveling. Likewise, if the background is super vibrant or really bright and your subject isn't, then your eye is going to travel there, and that's not the kind of image you want to produce. Finally, and this is just like a little show and tell, we'll take a look at a couple images, both good and bad, and I'll point out some of the things that are good and some of the things that are bad, what to avoid, and what to try to strive for. So, in this first image, you can see that my subject is not centered. He's also not the brightest thing in the frame. The background sky is horribly bright. His face is underexposed. We also have this super vibrant red bag right here, right in front. He is like the last thing you're wanting to look at, even though he should be the first. And so this image in general is awful. And I take a lot of awful images. So just be aware as well, and this is for anybody taking photos, you may not get the right image even after shooting it 10 or 15 times. And so some of this stuff, guys, I don't know what to tell you. It's just going to take time, sometimes some luck, the right weather conditions, the right lighting conditions, that kind of stuff. So just keep trying if you don't get it on the first time. In this second image, we have a pretty bright day. The sun was, I think, a little off to the left and behind the subject. You can see the light coming down across him from the back. But the cool thing is that his head is pretty bright. It tends to be the brightest thing. The background is blurry enough where it doesn't look too busy. He's in focus, so your eye travels there naturally. And there's pretty good contrast running in here. If anything, this spot, this bright spot right up here is probably not ideal. If I could have done something about that, I would have. And he's not exactly centered, but I think that was an artistic choice on my part. Here is a great example of what overhead lighting does to the eyes. This is that raccoon effect I was talking about. You can see the light is coming from almost directly overhead. It's foul and hideous. I don't like it at all. So be aware of that, especially when you're indoors and shooting your impresario or somebody that is interesting to you. Maybe you can tell me what's wrong with this photo. That's a trick question because it's my baby and obviously nothing's wrong. It couldn't be wrong. It's a perfect baby. We're moving on. Here's a great example of what window light looks like. The window is off to the right of the subject or left in the frame, and you're not getting anything super contrasty. It just looks really nice and pleasant. The subjects are in the middle of the frame, and my son probably cried 2 minutes after this. And then here's another example of what everything but your subject being brighter than your subject does. The only reason that you might be looking at the person first is because he's the part that's in focus, and he's also staring directly into the camera, which helps, guys. Eye contact with the camera helps the viewer notice the subject. If he's looking away or off to the side, you're shooting the back of his head, you're going to have to place some more emphasis in creative ways so we know where to look. If somebody's looking directly at the camera, though, it tends to hold your focus much quicker, and that's something to keep in mind. Here's another example of just a really low contrast situation, and probably one of the times that you need to be aware, even during golden hour, you can take a bad photo, especially if you place the sun behind your subject and you don't have enough light on your subject. And that's exactly what happened here. It just got totally washed out, ended up not really being a usable image. And finally, here's just one last example of window light, providing just really soft shadows, really good lighting across the subjects. And it's really easy, guys. You just place them you just place them opposite the window, and if there's sun out, you're probably gonna have a pretty decent shot. So that's really all there is to it, to produce better photos right off the bat, both for social, for yourself, for whoever, your friends and family. Those basic three things are lighting, composition, and color. Really, lighting is the most important. So if you keep one of those things in mind, let that be the one thing you keep in mind moving forward. If you guys want to know more about taking photos, how you can take better photos, the equipment that you have, if you have a camera, or even your phone, which has more settings than you probably know about, please let me know. I'd be willing to do another video like this to help you guys out in the field. I hope this has been helpful to you guys, and I'll probably see you on the next Rumble. See ya.